Welcome to our occasional series of Collegium booster shots, where we get to hear from Collegium alums and friends of Collegium about the ways that their teaching and scholarly creative work have been influenced by their colloquy experiences. I'm Karen Eifler, Director of Collegium, and today I'm in conversation with Angeli, a professor of writing and rhetoric at Marquette University and founder of Lumen Living, a kind of one-stop hub for integrating the many aspects of one's life, spiritual, intellectual, and just leaning into our bruised, blessed world. Liz was inspired by a strategy that one of Collegium's favorite retreat directors, Diane Millis, used, 4x4x4 storytelling, and she saw its potential in the classroom along with the spiritual benefits. Liz adapted it to something that she calls 2x2x2 storytelling and connects it to another strategy called lightning talks, which she has found to be really useful in cultivating crucial listening and reflection skills in her students and even in her colleagues and healthcare professionals. She's going to talk us through those in our conversation together. Welcome, Liz.
Hey, thanks, Karen. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm so happy that you're here too. Let's dive right in. I don't mean to bury the lead here, and I promise that we'll get to the very practical teaching ideas of 2x2x2 storytelling and lightning talks. But I think that two of the skills you've designed these pedagogical activities to teach really deserve a moment in the spotlight. You've argued that listening and reflecting are skills we too often take for granted that our colleagues and our students already have without teaching those explicitly enough. Could you unpack that a little bit for us?
Sure thing. So, in my home field of writing studies, I think we do a pretty good job about, teaching reflection, and we know the importance of that and everything. And, that was one of the big things that I was taught as a writing, instructor. It's, reflect, reflect, reflect. Here's how to do it. But what I learned when I trained to be a spiritual director a handful of years ago, everybody in my cohort, including me, it's like, oh yeah, we're good listeners.
Mm,
And it's like, oh, are we though? Are we? Think it's really a skill that, needs to be taught. And I think it's more assumed than
mm,
anything when students come into college. I mean,
mm,
we have intro to writing. I mean, and even, with I think sometimes we assume even a reading literacy level that our students maybe have or don't have, but
mm,
we don't talk that much about how students hold other people's stories, how they hear feedback, how they hear us, and how we even, listen to our students and what they need. And so that was really one thing that led me to integrate listening into my writing classes, because I thought, my gosh, I'm mostly teaching students who are going to be healthcare providers. I teach our writing for workplaces classes. I teach technical writing,
mm.
and specifically for our healthcare providers, you need to listen to a patient to know what to put in a patient care report.
Sure.
And I just saw a big gap kind of across a lot of the curriculum. And I've thought Diane Millis's 4x4x4 would be a great way to help students learn really how to be active listeners
Mhm.
without having them need to be trained counselors or go into nonviolent communication classes.
From what I understand, also not telling them, now I'm going to teach you how to be good listeners. It sort of evolves organically out of the teaching strategy.
Sort of. I mean, I actually ask them, and I introduce this now on the second day of class. And
Mm-hmm.
I tell them, how many of you were taught how to listen? And I mean, we're the beginning of the semester right now. I think out of 60 students I'm teaching this semester, I maybe had 5 students across 3 sections raise their hand, and they
Mm-hmm.
shared that, they said, well, I wasn't actually taught how to listen. It was more like, my mom really reinforced me on how to listen. Or someone said, I took a leadership class that taught me active listening. And I was like, okay, well, you have to self-select to go into that program. That's not something that you're
Mm-hmm.
gonna, learn on your own. But I'm intentional about telling them why we're doing this, and then because reflection is important. We reflect on, how was this experience for you? What are you
Yeah.
learning? All that good
Mm-hmm.
stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's get to the heart of things then. Could you talk us through the steps that are involved in the teaching strategy you call two by two by two storytelling? And I have to say, I, for one, usually learn best through examples and images, so I'd love it if you could offer a few for instances along the
Sure.
way.
Sure. So it's I pair it with the lightning talk. So I'm gonna talk about both of them, and I can give you an example. I'm trying to think of a good example that we just did in class. Oh, okay. So in the career discernment class, recently, the lightning talks the students needed to write were a prepared response to the question, tell us about a time you took a leap of faith.
Mm-hmm.
And how did you know it was a leap? And what sort of rules guided you and who helped you take this? And again, lightning talks are 30-second to 2-minute timed shares that students have to prepare some sort of a response to. They can write bullet notes, they can write, word for word. And for full disclosure, I always prepare a lightning talk to be ready to participate with the students in case the numbers are off and I need
Mm-hmm.
to play, as I call it, and I handwrite mine. So the students brought, they have their lightning talk. I'm going to be ready to tell someone in class about a time I took a leap. So they come to class with the lightning talk. Depending on how many students are there that day, we either go into triads
Mm.
or pairs.
Okay.
And, in addition to the very practical, how many students are in class that day, it goes with, okay, what's my goal for the students with this class? Do I want them to hear at least two perspectives on this? Do I want to give them full 2 minutes? Do we maybe want to break this down into a minute? So the two by two by two, very true to Diane's original activity. The twos stand for 2 minute blocks. So it's a three. Hold on, math. A series of three 2 minute sections.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes,
So
that adds
then
up.
okay, awesome. And then if it's and then so how this works is within that three 2-minute sections, the students will play the role of storyteller, where they're telling their lightning talk, or story listener, where they're listening to somebody else's lightning talk. And when the storyteller is telling their story, they get the first 2 minutes to share.
Mm-hmm.
And in those 2 minutes, while the storyteller's sharing, the story listeners have to follow Diane Millis's 4 R's of listening in 3 ways to remain curious.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't say anything. They revere the unique story that's being told. They refrain from speaking, and in their mind, they refrain from solving a problem or interpreting meaning. They remain silent, and they remind themselves that this is a partial story. This may not be the whole story.
Mm-hmm.
So while they're holding those 4 R's of listening, they are paying attention to what's piquing their curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
So in Diane Millis's language, that's paying attention to what they notice, appreciate, and wonder.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the first 2 minutes, the storyteller in this instance is telling the time they took a leap. Story listeners are listening. Boom, the 2-minute timer goes off. I remind them, finish up the 2 minutes. Story listeners, now they have 2 minutes to offer what they noticed, appreciated, and wondered about the first 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And in that second 2-minute block, the storyteller practices the 4 R's of listening.
Okay.
They don't say anything. And I
Mm-hmm.
tell them, I'm like, savor this 2 minutes. Like you have 2 glorious minutes to receive, questions and wonderings and noticings about your story.
Mm-hmm.
And so the two storytellers, if we're doing this in triads, they have those 2 full minutes. And sometimes there's silence, sometimes there's not. And then boom, 2 minutes goes off. Then the final 2 minutes goes back to the original storyteller, and they get to thicken the plot in Diane Millis's words. And they can answer any wonderings that the story listeners offered, or they can share whatever they want. I mean, that 2 minutes is really for them.
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, the story listeners continue to, follow the 4 R's of listening.
Mm-hmm.
Timer goes off, and then it rotates to the next person, and we go until everybody's gone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
And in a class period, would that be the center, or would that be would that be the duration of the class session, or is it part of a bigger whole in a class session?
it always depends on how much time we have. So in a
Mm-hmm.
50-minute session, it's usually the majority of the class period. And then once we're done, we'll debrief large group. Sometimes I'll have them switch groups, and so they'll do it a couple times to get multiple perspectives on their story. When I teach the graduate level career discernment workshop for our graduate students, it's a 3-hour seminar.
Mm-hmm.
So that's usually a much smaller part of what we're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
But we usually start with that just to get them kind of warmed up.
Yeah. And then do you help them transfer the skills that they've picked up through that very receptive, non-judgmental listening? I love the idea of revering the silence,
Mhm.
revering the story. Does that translate then into responding to one another's writing?
That's the hope.
Okay.
When we get to peer review,
Hmm.
we talk about, usually we spend part of that class period when I introduce peer review about, what don't you like about peer review? Because people
Mm.
usually have more feelings about what they don't like than what they do like about peer
Sure.
review. And
Yeah.
so we take space to talk about it, and then I say, hey friends, you have three great tools for offering feedback to people. It
Hmm.
doesn't just, live in spoken word. You can also say, I'm noticing that you tend
Hmm.
to bury topic sentences at the end of your paragraph, whatever we're working on. Yeah, that's sort of the hope. And then twice throughout the semester, at least, I give students an opportunity to reflect on their transferable skills,
Hmm.
and the two by two by two and the lightning talks usually come up as methods that
Hmm.
students will have taken with them even into other settings. Like one
Hmm.
student wrote last semester during their final reflection, she said, they're a leader of a club, and they found themselves using those
Mm.
skills to be a more effective leader. And I thought, wow, that's fantastic. Like that's
That's
good.
really good. And
Yeah.
in these days of being really conscious of helping ensure that our students are workforce ready,
Hmm.
what a great transferable skill to whatever context they find themselves after college.
Yeah.
Thanks. We hear a lot about, even 5 years past the pandemic, we hear a lot about students who were formed by online education having a tough time with face-to-face communication. I'd love to know how your students respond to both of these strategies.
My sense is that they're hungry for it.
Mm,
And I've noticed, and this is something that I've noticed, in the past couple of years when I've talked to my colleagues about it, the students thrive in small group work. As soon as we go to large group, it just seems like certain sections just really struggle with the
mm,
bigger large group.
mm-hmm,
And so, I find that I know that they all have had something to say in the
mm-hmm.
small groups. And
Sure.
so when we come back to large group, and I'm talking like maybe it's 16 to 20 students, they have something to share.
Mm-hmm,
And I've had one section last semester that it was just so interesting. I had an 8 a.m. section of technical writing and a 9:30 a.m. section of technical writing, and my 8 a.m.ers were raring to go at 7:50 almost every
oh
morning.
my gosh.
And I'm having that kind of repeat experience again this semester. Like my 8 a.m. section is just on it and on and on it. And my 9:30 section, it's like crickets after small group work.
Hmm.
And so I in their midterms last semester, I asked, and I do this every semester. One of the questions is, what do you need to succeed for the rest of the semester in this class or any class? Like just think about your life in general as a human. And I was shocked in that 9:30 section, about half of them said, I really struggle with social anxiety and
Hmm.
I clam up when we get to large group, and they said I really want to push myself,
Hmm.
when we get back from, break.
Mm-hmm.
And I shared that with the students. I mean, I didn't mention names, obviously, but I just was like, okay, folks, you need to know that if you struggle with, if you get nervous before you have to share,
Mm-hmm.
you're not alone. And I said, so what are we going to do to create a community that's conducive to people feeling like they can take a chance, like they can take the chances that they're taking in the small group into large group? And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's just reminding them that the grace that you've been met with in your small group, you will probably be met with that same grace when 21 of us are listening to you.
Sure.
And so it's been sort of a helpful bridge to just help students develop the confidence
Mm-hmm.
to speak and to know that they have a story that can last more than 5 seconds or 30
Mm-hmm.
seconds. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
been that often is a growing edge for them. They're like, well, I have nothing to say. It's like, well, you do, and you got 2 minutes to share it right now. So take 5 seconds of silence to just see what's gonna, come to the surface for you now.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Mm-hmm.
think it's a helpful sort of practical, immediately actionable, tool that teachers can use and then the students can use, to help with that community creation.
Yeah. It seems to me, the way you've described it so far, that the prompts that you give your students are really important. Do you have kind of a bag that you dip into, or is it off the cuff, or is it tied to goals in the course that you want them ultimately to achieve?
Yeah. All of the above.
Okay.
I'm changing them every semester, and it depends on the class. And so one of the lightning talks that we did actually yesterday in the career discernment class, I had them do show and tell.
Hmm.
I had them do, and I wanted them to bring an object that lit them up. I said,
Hmm.
find an object that lights you up. Lightning talk is prepare a 2 minute story about it,
Hmm.
explain why you know it lights you up, and then offer, say, if if this object had a piece of advice, what would it tell you? And
Hmm.
so I did that a little bit differently yesterday. We did pairs, and then I had them introduce each other with the pairs. So that was kind of fun. But I it just sort of is. I rarely do lightning talks off the cuff. Like I always want them to come to class prepared with it.
Hmm.
But I have on the course schedule when I sketch it out, I have the students have the lightning talks well in advance. So
Hmm.
I have the lightning talks set for the whole semester, but I may tweak them depending on how things are going,
Okay.
with class. But or if I look at one and I'm like, I'm not even excited about that one, so I don't even know if the students are going to be like, we're
Mm.
tossing it, let's bring in a new one.
Okay. Yeah. What are a couple other prompts that you have found really fruitful?
Oh, I do a lot of lightning talks based on values.
Hmm.
And so when we do that early in the semester, and so they get a list of soulsalt.com has a great list of 102 values that students read, and then they pick what resonates with them, and then they prepare a lightning talk about what their top three values are, how they learned them, and then they're invited to give an example of how they embodied those values in the past week.
Hmm.
I often will do prompts on tell us about a time you made a decision. How did you know it was the right one? I'm trying to think others. Sometimes I'll pair them with the readings, like, what really resonated with you? What did you find challenging? But the show and tell one, I gotta say, is one of the ones I was most excited about this semester.
I'll bet.
That was fun. And I mean, that was just such a fun class. I mean, the students were, I mean, it was like being back in kindergarten.
Sure.
It was just great.
I can see the long-term benefits in achieving course teaching goals, but it's also speaking to a kind of playfulness that we
Mhm.
sometimes don't see in college teaching or just in the business of teaching, period. Even in kindergarten, it's gotten pretty strict about what the little ones need to have accomplished by the end of their first formal year of schooling.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And that was one thing that, we were having a great time. And again, this was the undergraduate career discernment class. And I asked them, I said, okay, great. We've just spent a half an hour talking about show and tell. What does any of this have to do with discernment and finding a job?
Mm-hmm.
And, the students were great. A lot of them they said, well, you can see, because one of the readings was about finding what brings you joy and happiness. And they said, well, we can see that, finding joy and happiness is important in a job. You can turn a hobby into a profession. One student said brilliantly, I think it's also important to know that our hobbies do not need to become our jobs. And I said, absolutely,
That's
because
fantastic.
sometimes, and I tell them that too, it's like your passion does not have to become your career. Like it just doesn't have to be if you don't want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then, we talked about we're really going to be getting into the heart of Ignatian discernment next week. And so this was a warm up to them practicing their skills at learning what constellation means for them. And
Mm-hmm.
so I sort of planted that seed too. And I mean, even some of the stories they told, I asked the students to say, because we talked about LinkedIn yesterday too. I said, okay, I said, if this student in class would have told their lightning talk, used their lightning talk as their about summary on their LinkedIn profile, what would that say to you as a potential employer?
Hmm.
And the students shared, they're like, wow, it would tell me that he's really creative and he cares about the earth and, he's innovative and, collaborative. And I said, okay. I said, noted.
Not bad at all. Not
Yeah,
bad at
yeah.
all. I think it's really important that listeners understand that you didn't develop these tactics to use only with mainstream English or rhetoric students, but for people in formation to be healthcare providers. You challenge not just your students, but practitioners in healthcare to pay more attention to what I call muscular listening and reflection. How is that message usually received, like if you're doing it in a professional in-service
Yeah.
session?
So I have done this activity with our faculty and our staff. And I think sometimes, people are surprised, like, oh, wait, I haven't actually learned how to listen.
Mm,
Or I've never had someone listen to my story for 2 solid minutes.
mm,
Or people feel free, like, oh, I don't have to solve somebody's problem when I'm listening to them. I can
mm,
just show up and receive what I'm hearing. So for them, kind of broadly speaking, it can be challenging because I think the reflex is I got to fix, I got to solve,
Mm-hmm.
but it sort of takes the pressure off. And I don't do trainings. I don't really work directly with healthcare providers who are in the field as much as I used to. And so this is something that I haven't done with like the EMS folks that I used to work with. I would, if anyone's listening that would love to bring me in for something like that, I would be open to that because I really do miss working with the healthcare folks. I could just see, with especially with the students that it was refreshing. It
Mm-hmm.
was like, okay, I'm going to learn how to do this because I think we all have experiences with healthcare providers where we were not listened to and then we were
Mm-hmm.
not heard and then bad things happen when that muscular that like you said is not built up. I haven't had a whole lot of resistance to this activity both with like working professionals and with students. People get
Mm-hmm.
nervous and uncomfortable before we do it, but that's expected.
It seems like it bears a lot of fruit,
Yeah.
despite that. And I could see it being so helpful if we just cultivated those skills a little bit. Our faculty meetings or department meetings might
Uh-huh.
go a lot differently. I'll just leave
Yes.
it at that. As you probably know, in Collegium, we maintain that professors don't just work with their heads and hands, but with their hearts and spirits as well. As we bring this conversation to a close, what are some benefits of two by two by two storytelling and lightning talks for teachers using them apart from better editing and writing on their students' end of things?
Yeah, I believe it was Mary O'Reilly who said, "We are listened into existence."
Hmm.
And that is the core of this activity.
Mm-hmm.
It is about creating empathy. It is, creating understanding, getting students to feel confident, being open to hearing perspectives that you didn't think of. As I share in the article and I shared earlier, I participate in this activity alongside the students frequently.
Mm-hmm.
And I have learned so much from the questions the students ask me when it's their turn to share what they've noticed, appreciated, and wondered.
Mm-hmm.
And I always commend them. I'm like, some of them get a little nervous, and I'm like, no, I need to hear whatever you need to say.
Yeah.
Like I am learning. Like, we're always in discernment, and I am in discernment with the things that I'm sharing with you. So please give me your questions. And they have helped me. I don't know that they know it,
Mm-hmm.
but they have helped me navigate some pretty challenging moments in my career.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't let on more than I need to with them because, I mean, the boundaries are really important. And again, that's not the point of the activity, isn't to overshare. It's
Mm-hmm.
to really show up fully mind, body, spirit. And the questions really are not academic questions for the most part. They are soul level, spirit level questions. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and um, and I just think it changes the dynamic of the classroom experience that we're really good being in our heads.
Mm-hmm.
And, I just think in order to be agents of change in the world, we have to show up fully for ourselves so we can show up fully for others. And this activity helps do that.
That's fantastic. That's wonderful. And I can just see so many potential ripples that would be so useful, especially I'm thinking about folks who are skeptical about deviating from the approved lesson plan or the
Hmm.
way it's always been done. And you talk about, let's say 10 or 15 minutes as a real investment in getting to those things that are really important that you and your
Yes.
students accomplish.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
great.
sometimes, I mean, I even modify it to a one by one by one. And if they're in pairs, that takes a grand total of 6 minutes. I mean, and that 6 minutes can change everything.
You bet.
So it's I am grateful to Diane, for
Mm-hmm.
introducing it to me at a retreat
Mm-hmm.
years ago. And I'm just also grateful for my students who have journeyed with me
Yeah.
on this activity. It's been
Yeah.
it's been a lot of fun.
And I'm grateful to folks like you who take something in one context and transfer it so beautifully into another one. I mean, it just speaks to ultimately everything's integrated.
Yeah.
Ultimately, we're part of a whole. Well, that brings this Collegium booster shot to a close for now. You can read some of Liz Angeli's refereed scholarship on these topics in the Open Access Journal of Response to Writing. The article's called Responding Through Listening: promoting listening skills through lightning talks and 2 by 2 by 2 storytelling, and it's linked in this episode's description. Thanks so much for joining us, and I hope that you'll join us for future conversations about practical strategies for mission integration across the curriculum. Peace be with you. Thanks, Liz.
Thank you.